What a mood. Hey everyone, I'm Josh Townsend. I'm the host of the Social Wildlife Podcast. Hope you guys have all had a great week. You've all been practicing a bit of self-care and you're not being too hard on yourself. Recently I've been a bit behind. I'm deep into my study now and balancing out parenting, work, settling into a new house and finding time to maintain the rest of my life, like my training and just keeping myself centered. It has been a full-on few months and I've been really looking forward to this episode. It's a topic that's had quite a serious impact on my life. I've suffered from low self-esteem for the majority of my adult life. It's definitely affected my friendships and my relationships. It's affected my ability to apply myself to projects, to work and other interests. It's definitely driven unhealthy behaviours which have hurt people, and I've caused major setbacks in my life because of this. It's affected my ability to cope with these setbacks and other hard times in my life. It's also fueled fears of inadequacy or that I'm not doing well enough, and sometimes it's even resulted in a real lack of self-care. It's put me into downward spirals more than once. Anyway, thanks again for being here. Let's get stuck into it. Welcome back to the Social Wildlife. So today I'm going to talk about the dangers of low self-esteem and some of my experiences with it. This episode is for anyone who feels they may be battling with feelings of low self-worth, if they've got a constant low mood or feeling a real lack of fulfillment in life, or maybe the people around them might seem to be feeling this way. If you believe you've got a friend or a loved one that's affected, maybe this episode is for them. If you've ever felt shit about yourself frequently or for a sustained period, you might have low self-esteem. The good news is low self-esteem is common. Well, that's not good news, but yeah, 85% of the world's population has it. I think that's horrific, and it obviously needs to be addressed. I mean, how much better would the world be if we all felt happy with who we were? How important do you think it is to feel a sense of self-worth or self-confidence? I think it's essential, and it's definitely essential to happiness. Overall, if negative feelings of self-worth are strong enough, it's unlikely we're able to feel truly happy, if at all. Self-esteem is your opinion of yourself, so how much we value who we are as a person and how we perceive ourselves. It's our inner voice that tells us whether we're good enough to do or achieve something in life. It can be shaped by our life events such as abuse, serious failures, social standards, or by something as simple as setting unrealistic or unachievable goals. It's based on 4 components. So your self-confidence, your identity, or who you are, your sense of belonging, and your confidence in your abilities. When we have low self-esteem, our mental health can suffer. And if our self-talk is often negative, this can harm our mental health. Healthy self-esteem means that we like ourselves and we value our achievements. We'd generally be confident, and we'd be confident in our ability to make decisions. We'd normally have secure and honest relationships. We're not overcritical of ourselves and of others. We're resilient and we handle stress and setbacks effectively and in a healthy way. Everyone lacks confidence sometimes. I mean, if you had low self-esteem, that would mean you normally feel unhappy, unsatisfied. You might feel that way most of the time. You could have insecure relationships that would be full of dishonesty. You could be critical of others and yourself. People with low self-esteem are generally very critical of themselves, and they often have difficulty moving past challenges and mistakes. It may lead them to isolating themselves because they want to protect their self-esteem. Usually they can't handle disruptions. They don't stand up for themselves. And they may not stand up for themselves because they'd rather stay quiet and put space between them and their problems. Often speaking negatively about yourself or others is a sign of low self-esteem. Blaming yourself or feeling others are better than you. You might not feel like you deserve to be happy, and you might have extreme responses to disapproval or criticism. This may be in general, or it might be in specific areas of your life. So you might be fine at work, for example, but in your relationships, you're not feeling great, or vice versa. There's multiple areas where you could be fine or you could be really lacking. It can be changed, but it needs to be addressed, and it is something that needs to be worked on daily in the right way. And it's hard to start, but it does get easier. Working on something daily always seems like such a big task, but realistically, once you start, it is fine, you're away. So today I'm going to be talking about my experiences with low and high self-esteem. how I believe it was responsible for some of the extremely hard times in my life, or at least partly responsible for some of those times, what I did about it, and what low self-esteem might feel and look like in yourself or others. I'm going to be talking about the causes of low self-esteem and the problems it can create in your life, and the strategies for dealing with it and building it. So as I've said, I've had low self-esteem probably most of my life. I was very lucky to have such supportive parents and family. My mum always told me I would do well and I could achieve anything that I put my mind to. She encouraged me to talk about how I felt. And the absence or opposite of this is usually the source of low self-esteem in a large percentage of the population. I'm very grateful for that input that I had when I was young. As a kid, I didn't really feel like I fit in. I felt like my friends at school always had established groups. I was always caring and wanted the best for others, but I often had friends that put me down or were abrasive, or were untrustworthy. I wanted to stand out like most kids do, but I didn't feel I had much to offer. I felt I couldn't do some of the things my friends could do. Often they were going skiing, they were going on holidays. When I got to be a teenager, they had like nicer cars, they had attention from girls, they had money to spend. I wasn't always interested at school, and I was often in trouble. I was skinny and weak, and I always felt cold. I felt like my friends were often better than me at the things I tried to be good at. I tried to process these things as best as I could, but often I was left feeling uncomfortable socially, like I couldn't relax. I had friends that would be welcoming one minute and then unreasonable the next. I remember one friend I had who was problematic, and he had no idea how to treat people. I confided in him once, telling him I'd love to study viticulture and own a winery one day. And I'll always remember he responded with, "I'll always make more money than you, Josh." I mean, that just screams insecurity. And at the time, I didn't really know how to deal with it. But looking back, I wish I'd had some of the skills I do now, because I would have definitely had more to say. I've made plenty of money in lots of different ways. And I'd say I've made a lot more than he has so far. But some of that hasn't been above board, and I'm not proud of that. The point is that I remember that moment, and those people or situations early in your life just build on the doubts that you may not get to where you want to go, or that you may not be good enough. When it came to relationships, I briefly covered in my first episode that my first 2 relationships ended with them either leaving me for one of my friends or hooking up with someone new in front of me. At 15 or 16, I mean, things like that are bound to happen, and I don't blame them at all for that. I've done far worse, and I think that at that age, we really have no idea how to break up with people or constructively talk about how we feel. I don't even think we have the skills to deal with breakups in a healthy way. Those situations hammered my self-esteem at the time, and going into my next relationship, I had no faith in anyone to treat me well. I figured it was really only a matter of time until I was left or cheated on, so what was the point in committing to that person? I mean, that was my mentality. The problem was I still pursued relationships, and on the surface, I expected commitment from them. I mean, what an unhealthy dynamic that was. It's just so unreasonable to expect that. But at the time, I guess I couldn't. At the time, I just don't think I understood exactly how I was feeling and what was going on for me. In the early stage of my teens, I was skateboarding around town with my friends a lot. It represented my freedom, and I always felt under-resourced in it. My friends were often able to pressure their parents into buying them like really good setups, like skateboarding setups, and they'd always have like DVS or DC shoes, like Osiris shoes and things. I mean, shoes at that point, those kind of shoes were like $300, and I was always left with real basic skateboard setups and the $100 shoes that were on sale and one size too small. They always seemed to be far more skilled than me too. I guess they were more willing to take risks and just had those technical skills with skateboarding, which was, at the time, it was quite, if you could do it, you could do it. But I wasn't one of those kids. And I wish tutorials on YouTube were a thing back then. I mean, kids these days do have it far too easy. I was the first one of my friends to get a car when I was 16, so that was great. In the scene that I was part of, I felt very valued, but my friends were not respectful of it, and it was an old Subaru my dad gave me for the ski field, which was just not cool. We would do laps up and down the main street in Christchurch and go out on missions all night. The first Fast and the Furious movie had just come out, and I'd see kids my age around town with like Skylines and Silvias, RX-7s and WRXs and things, and that always made me feel pathetic. I think it was just, that was where my value was based at the time. It was like, what you had. As a teenage boy, a car can be a powerful status symbol. At that age, it's the car, not the skateboard, that represents freedom. And what you're driving can definitely make you cool to those types of people. It didn't help that I always saw beautiful girls around these guys that had these cars. I mean, everyone knew these guys. And often if they could afford the car, they had the money or the parents with money. So they seemed to have a lot to offer. As I've got older, it's become clear that often some of these guys had very little to offer outside of the car and the other resources that they would flaunt, but I'll talk about that later on. I went through numerous stages of trying to fit in. I've always had different music tastes to most of my friends. I believe music can really define your culture and the types of people you get on with. New Zealand has a very strong hip-hop and R&B culture, and I do like the odd track, but as much as I tried, it just wasn't for me. I tried dressing the way my friends did. I would low-ride jeans. I would use the same words, and I didn't feel like, it just didn't feel right. It's the period of my life that I think I felt the least like myself, but it was clear I was trying to work out who I was, and I really didn't feel like I fit in. I got into my first serious relationship, and she kind of put a stop to all that. This private school girl made some big changes in me, which I really pushed back against initially, as it was a world that I didn't know, and none of my friends were like that, but I'm so glad that she put that work in and I guess inspired me in a lot of ways. Although I knew we weren't right for each other, I became very codependent, and I felt threatened by many of the guys that she knew. Her friends could see that I was nothing like them, and I did my best to relate, but I always ended up showing our differences. My attitude towards the situation meant that I really had one foot in and one foot out of the relationship. I was resisting any pressure to change. When this was compounded by the low self-esteem from previous relationship pain and generally feeling inadequate, I ended up doing a lot of damage. She left me for someone that I felt I couldn't compete with, and one of the most painful years of my life was to follow. My self-esteem was so low, I couldn't talk to anyone about it, and as an example, I would write the text messages that I wanted to send her in a text document on my computer, and that would kind of prevent me looking psychotic or desperate when I sent them to her. By far the most significant thing I ever did for my self-esteem was to start training at the gym. I joined in 2006, and I became obsessed with that growth. I've always been very lean, so I did what I could to bulk, quite dirty, and managed to go from 63 to 85 kilos in the first 5 years, and I still stayed pretty lean. Because I was so insecure about my size and weight, this effectively solved that problem, and although I was never really content, it was enough, and I did feel a lot better about myself. I did feel proud of what I'd achieved, and I felt there were people on the same journey who at that point looked up to me and wanted to learn from me, so that was a real boost as well. When I joined the army, it was perfect timing, and it was a real culture shock. Suddenly there was a clear social structure and rank structure, and what was cool was very different. It took me a while to adjust to this, but it actually did wonders for my self-esteem. I made a great group of friends, and I felt like I could contribute. I saw men that were proud to represent the unit that I was part of, and that made me proud too. I was involved in healthy competition, and I was forced to better myself in every way. Something I did realise very quickly though is that although half these boys would drag you into cover under fire, they would likely fuck your missus, so you had to be very careful. After leaving the army and getting into what I would consider negative social circles, my self-esteem was boosted by illusions of feeling part of a group, but then broken by the betrayals and the backstabbing that happened over the following years. Toxic relationships also took their toll, but overall I kept building my self-worth through lesson after lesson. I was trying to remain optimistic and thoroughly exploring what had gone wrong and what my part to play was. When I got locked up, that was a massive hit to my self-esteem, and the media exposure that came with it, including a horrific photo they took of me staring into space, mouth breathing on my way to the car, meant that not only was it out there that I was a criminal, but I even got to read the comments of these so-called friends rinsing me in a public forum on Facebook and underneath the stuff articles and things like that. The year in prison that I did was extremely hard to stay positive about myself. In there, your rights are taken away, your freedom of movement, your holidays, phones, access to family, friends, and all the other things you enjoy. You're strip searched often, which is it's extremely demeaning. Like, you just feel like shit. Your cell is searched and pulled apart. You feel like scum, and in a lot of ways, I guess you are. But Keeping your self-esteem intact throughout that is hard work. Once I was released, I still felt that way, but over time I adjusted again, and I realized how formative the experience had been. It taught me a lot about myself and others, and that helped me further build on my sense of self. My relationship then had a big impact on how I felt about myself, and I had a huge impact on her too. We were not right for each other in so many ways, but I'm grateful for what I learned and the good times. In some areas of my life, my self-esteem was healthy and intact, and in others it was non-existent. I questioned so much about myself over that time, but when I was finally on my own, I was able to create positive steps toward rebuilding and begin displaying the right attitude. I was almost there. In the last few months, I've been able to confront some of the behaviour that I've had deeply ingrained in me for most of my life. I strongly believe that so much of my unhealthy behaviour came from unresolved low self-esteem, and I feel that because I didn't address it, I created dangerous situations and huge setbacks for myself. I hurt people and I ruined my reputation in the eyes of people I cared about and people who cared about me. I ultimately disadvantaged myself in some of the worst ways possible. Low self-esteem is dangerous to yourself and others in so many ways. We often aren't aware of how much this limits us and how much it affects the people closest to us. It can cause us to neglect our health, appearance, and degrade our lifestyle. It can also ruin friendships, relationships, or hurt the people we care about most. At worst, if we don't address it, we risk developing serious health problems like depression, anxiety, eating disorders, social phobias, or substance use issues. These conditions can sneak up, and by the time we realise they're an issue, it may be much harder to do something about it. The time to act is definitely now. It is our responsibility to change this attitude towards ourselves. We all have parts of ourselves that we don't like or things that we regret, but we need to make sure for our sake and for the sake of others that we work through our issues and we make sure we build this part of ourselves so we can ultimately be happy and proud of who we are with no regrets. Something to keep in the back of your mind is that a huge component of self-esteem is related to achievement. So this obviously changes as we get older with hormone levels and life experience, and is usually it's different for men and women. What we consider to be an achievement could be as simple as making friends as a child, or having your work at school marked high, or getting attention from girls as a teenage boy, or getting that car you've always wanted. It could also be your boyfriend of 5 years proposing to you, or buying that first house, getting that job, or getting to that goal weight. Sometimes our sense of achievement is warped. As an example, when I was on steroids, my mindset changed. Especially in the first few times that I took it, like high testosterone levels are associated with things like increased aggression, irritability, it makes you more competitive, and it increases your sex drive. I noticed that my priorities had shifted more towards social success and girls, which obviously can and does contribute to destroying relationships, which I have done, and I have seen done many times. When I was a child and a teenager, the main problems that low self-esteem caused was internal. So it affected my priorities and moods in a big way. The main thing was that I felt shit about myself often, but because I couldn't address it at the time, I carried this broken foundation into every relationship I had and became extremely codependent every time. I wasn't loyal, I was manipulative, I acted on things I shouldn't have. I was highly competitive, but I kept it quiet and I tried my best to work in silence. I made sure I was doing the things my friends wanted to be able to do, but I took huge risks to make that happen. I hurt so many people close to me because I didn't have faith that they liked me for me, and I didn't really feel like they would ultimately be loyal to me. As I've said earlier, putting in the work and getting to the body shape that I wanted was a huge boost for my self-esteem. But because I hadn't sorted out any of the internal stuff that was going on for me, I misused that to my advantage, and I thrived on any attention I received. I believe that you should be proud of your achievements, but extremely careful about how you use any form of success. You can ruin people by giving into situations that make you dishonourable, and ultimately could make you look like a real piece of shit. This really applies to most forms of success. I mean, you could be rich, you could be beautiful, or an expert in your field, but if you misuse this or you manipulate people with it, that makes you a real fuckwit. And I know from experience how that feels. It's the lowest my self-esteem has ever been. Many people feel they're missing out on life. Sometimes these things are out of reach or they change as we age. When we're kids, we want the toys. Teenage boys might want the car and the attention from the girls. As adults, things could gradually change to the house, like the money, stability, children, retirement, or grandchildren. Our sense of achievement will then be based around these new things, but often it might be spread around a few of them. We need to make sure that we prioritise these things in a healthy way, and that we're realistic and understand what we can have right now, and if we are trading one thing off for another. I know now that my priorities are stability, building healthy relationships with people, and just working on myself. On my journey doing this, I'm achieving realistic milestones all the time, which helps boost my self-esteem and allows me to continue on what I believe is a positive path. Our social circles, relationships, and lifestyles have a huge part to play in the creation or destruction of our self-esteem. There are so many things you can do to start building that self-esteem up to the most powerful that it's ever been. High self-esteem is known as self-love. It's a real thing, and you've got to actually be someone that you would love. So what can we do about it? I mean, there are so many ways to build self-esteem, and they all start with you. So first step would really be identify the negative beliefs that you have about yourself. You can write down evidence that challenges these beliefs. So start thinking about where they come from. Are they from current situations? Are they happening now? Or are they things that happened a long time ago? Are they based on real evidence, or are they based on feelings? When these things come up, look for evidence that contradicts them. So write down both the thought and the evidence that you find. Keep reminding yourself that although an event may have occurred in the past, what you're dealing with now is just a feeling, and it isn't true. Write down good things that others say about you, and check back and look at that list whenever you can. Some people are just more prone to negative thinking, while others might set impossibly high standards for themselves. Try and halve how critical you are about yourself and live at that level for a while. See if it's any different. It will be. Recognize what you're good at. Do more of that. If you're good at something, then a sense of achievement's almost certain to follow. I know when I started teaching paragliding, I realized how much I'd learned over the years and how easily I did things that the students seemed to find impossible. I could see how much they valued my input and perspective. I mean, that's a great feeling, and it seriously does boost your self-esteem. Make sure you celebrate your successes, no matter how small they are. Give yourself a challenge and accept that you might fail. Find the humour in failures. Like, for example, if you made dinner and your partner told you it didn't taste great, have a laugh about it and just work out what might have gone wrong. I mean, you don't have to take life so seriously. On the other hand, if something more serious happened, like if you forgot to pick up your child from school or you failed an exam, then just take ownership, admit fault, and often doing this will help the other person or other people involved to see you more positively. And there's always a positive learning experience to apply to your future. People who are really skilled at certain things still make mistakes. So if you fail in an area of your life you consider yourself to be well practiced in, of course that will impact on your global self-esteem. It is still important to be kind to yourself. This stuff happens to everyone. Get to know yourself. Are there things that make you happy right now, or things that used to make you happy that you can kind of reignite into your life? What is it that you value most? Be kind to yourself. Often we have the right advice for a friend, but we choose to ignore it when it applies to us. We care about the friend resolving their issues, but we feel we can't apply it to ourselves because of these negative emotions that sit in the way. If we begin to force ourselves to take our own advice, or the advice that we would give to friends, we start to see positive changes, and that reinforces that we're on the right track. I promise you, it does get easier. Being kind to yourself means being gentle to yourself at times when you feel like you're being self-critical. So being critical is useful in moderation, but if we're too hard on ourselves, it makes us feel useless, like we're in a constant state of failure. Forgiving ourselves for our decisions and mistakes is essential for growth. And to move on from the person we used to be into the person we want to be, we need to start doing this. Positive affirmations can work well, especially in people who already have high self-esteem. But if it is low, we may need to change the wording of how we affirm these things to ourselves to make it feel achievable. So instead of saying to yourself that you're going to be a success, try saying things like, I'm going to keep pushing until I succeed. Although both are true, the second one's more believable in the moment. And that is actually a really important part of giving yourself advice, is that when you hear yourself say it, you're like, okay, no, that sounds believable. I can get there. I can, at the very least, I can keep going until I get there. Work on being more assertive. This means that we're comfortable saying no and talking openly about how we feel, good or bad. This can make us feel guilty or fearful at first, especially when you start seeing different reactions from people who aren't used to hearing you speak that way. The more we practice it, the more comfortable we feel and the stronger our self-respect will be. It literally changes you as a person, and trust me, you feel a lot better if you're capable of being assertive. Remember, life does have its twists and turns. We've got to roll with it. We've got to understand it's all part of our journey. We've got to focus on what is within our control, and we've got to stop comparing ourselves to others. Just stay in your lane. Be careful who you follow on socials too. Self-esteem can take a hit every time we scroll or search up that person that we idolize. Social media is not real life, and we can make assumptions about someone else's successes from what we see online. We need to think about our social circle and its influence on us. We need to make sure we build positive relationships, and these relationships are based on support. You'll already know people in your life who represent support and which ones represent confusion or negative feelings. Accept your thoughts, feel them, and adjust them slowly over time. Processing them is essential to moving past them, but don't just let them stay on repeat. It's normal for our self-esteem to fluctuate daily, if not hourly, but the best way to maintain its stability is with a healthy lifestyle and small, consistent achievements. Remember to pay attention to other people's self-esteem too. If you notice someone close to you is showing signs of self-doubt, they may need your support. One of the most obvious steps to high self-esteem is positive lifestyle changes. Sleep, diet, exercise, spending time outdoors, avoiding drugs and alcohol are all top of my list. These activities are proven to have a healthy impact on dopamine, serotonin, endorphins within your body and will without a doubt improve your mood and your outlook on life. Sometimes I would put my weight vest on and walk 5k up the hill in freezing rain, like we're talking July, middle of winter, sideways, howling rain up on the hills. It was tough, but every time I got home I had a hot shower and I felt amazing for the rest of the day. It was almost euphoric, and I think it's the most relaxed I've ever felt. Remember too that research shows high self-esteem predicts success and well-being in relationships, work and health. It gives us coping skills that makes us more resilient to stress, anxiety, challenges or adversity, and it inspires growth, allowing us to put ourselves in challenging situations and pursue new relationships. This gives us endless opportunities for psychological growth. If we have one responsibility to ourselves to put ourselves on a positive path, it's to continue building and maintaining healthy self-esteem. Anyway, that's enough from me. If you like this podcast, feel free to follow The Social Wildlife on Instagram. I'm on Facebook and TikTok as well. If you have any feedback or questions, you can comment under my posts or slide on into my DMs. You'll find these episodes and new ones as they come out on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and other leading podcast providers. As always, have a fantastic weekend. Remember to be kind to each other. And if you have the ability to love yourself first. Thanks for listening. See you guys soon.